Welcome back to the Self-Esteem and Confidence Mindset podcast with me, Johnny Pardo. Today, we're going to be talking about self-confidence, discipline, mental toughness, mindset, and many, many more things. Today's guest is Dr Baldwin, and I'm just going to talk about Dre before we go into the conversation, just do a little bit of an introduction. So Dre is the CEO and founder of Work on Your Game. He has given 4 TED Talks and has authored 33 books. Wow. Dre's content has been viewed over 100 million times. His daily Work on Your Game podcast has over 2,300 episodes and over 5 million listeners. Dre had a 9-year professional basketball career playing in 8 countries. Dre's framework is the roadmap in reverse for the professional mindset, strategy, systems, and execution. Amazing. So first of all, welcome to the show, Dre.
Thank you for having me, Johnny. I'm excited for this conversation.
Yeah, me too. Me too. And wow, you've certainly done a lot. And 33 books. I mean, I've written a few books myself and it's really good fun. But yeah, 33 and all the other content you're putting out to the world. So first of all, thank you for that. So Dre, just be really interesting to kind of maybe hear for anyone who's new to you, maybe a couple of highlights from your story and really what got you out of basketball to helping, people more in their professional career. What took you from that?
Great question. I'm sure we'll cover a lot of the details in this conversation, but I'll give the overview, 2-minute version. Come from Philadelphia, now live in South Florida, Miami. Always played sports, picked up basketball around age 14, which is pretty late if you're going to go somewhere in sports. Barely played in high school. I walked on to play in college, which meant I was not like a highly sought after player. I played at the Division III level, which is just the 3rd tier of basically talent in college sports. That level does not produce many pro players. But when I got out of college, I still wanted to play basketball. So I basically had to learn how to market myself. I learned how to sell and market myself to get into pro basketball. That's how I was able to make it happen. Wow. And I took some of the footage that I had accumulated while trying to make it into pro basketball, because I used to go to these events. It was basically like casting calls for basketball players. And I took the footage from those events and I started putting them on this brand new website called YouTube. And that's where people started to get to know me. I started to kind of build my name was on YouTube from basketball material. And those players, while they were watching my videos, just showing people how to practice the game, they started asking questions about my mindset simply because they saw that I was going to the gym, or at least I was putting videos out every day. So they're like, man, who is this random guy who's putting videos on his random website every day for no reason? Because mind you, at that time, you can't make money from putting videos on YouTube, right? At this 2005, when I first started putting videos out. So there's no such thing as an influencer. We're not using the word content. We weren't even saying social media at the time. So these people are wondering, why was I doing this? And then they would just ask, once they found out about my background, well, what was the mentality that kept you going when you faced all these setbacks and you came from this very humble beginning as an athlete, but you kept trying and you built yourself up into someone who actually became good and became a professional level player, which is the top 1% of athletes. How were you able to do that? What were you thinking? Because a lot of these players, they were in similar situations that I had been in. So they were trying to figure out what they needed to do mentally so they could do the same thing that I had done. So in answering their questions, I just started talking about just the way that I thought, just my mentality. And I naturally started talking about things like discipline, confidence, mental toughness, taking initiative, because this is just the way that I think. And I thought this was a normal way of thinking. I didn't think anything of it. I thought everybody thought like that. But as I kept sharing the material, the players would tell me, hey, man, you sound like a college philosopher. You sound like a professor, the way you explain this stuff. And then, Johnny, people who didn't even play sports, because I used to make these videos every Monday called the Weekly Motivation. I would put that on YouTube every Monday. This is after the players started asking about mindset. So that's when I started doing that. And these 2 to 5 minute selfie videos, before selfie videos were a thing. And people who didn't play basketball started finding me through those videos, because the other 6 days of the week, I was just posting basketball drills. Like, here's how they dunk. Here's how you do the Steph Curry move. Here's how you do a move like Kobe. But that one day a week when I did the mindset video, people who didn't play ball started finding me, and they would say, Dre, the stuff you're talking about applies to all of life. It is not limited to just sports. So to answer your question, that's what planted the seed in my mind that I could serve an audience of people who had never picked up a basketball or played any sport for that matter, if I just took that part of what I was doing and expounded on it. And I always knew that I understood that when I stopped playing basketball, I wasn't going to be cool to the basketball players because I wasn't on the court every day anymore. So in 2015, when I stopped playing, I already knew what I was going to do next, and I already kind of had momentum in that direction. So my transition from sports to business was easier than most athletes, simply because I already knew exactly what I was going to be doing.
That's awesome. Love the story. And it sounds like lots of people were coming to you and getting that guidance, like not just the basketballers, like you said, it turns into the motivation. How do you develop these kind of like the habits, the discipline that you're doing? It sounds like people are coming to you and approaching you on that, which is amazing. Was there anyone on your journey that helped you like develop, that you looked up to sort of like role model?
Oh man, there were a lot of people who I took bits and pieces from. Same way that I developed pieces just as myself and as an entrepreneur, and by just taking little pieces from different people and kind of putting it all together as a jigsaw puzzle. Same thing I did in sports. I would take one move from this guy and one move from this player. I'd never try to play like any one guy. I would just take pieces from anybody and put it all together. So to answer your question here, I would have to start at home. I had to start with my parents. They were about discipline, about, do your chores, do your homework, things like that. They were not athletes. They did not raise me to be an athlete. They raised me to go to school, get good grades, get a degree, the normal path. So that was the discipline that I got at home. And then when I went to play sports, I just took the discipline that I had learned at home and I just applied that to sports because nobody taught me how to play ball. I basically taught myself. So the only thing I knew was, well, just keep showing up consistently and hopefully something works out. And it ended up working out. So I would have to say that. But as far as your question here, Johnny, are you referring to a specific part of my life that I would say I looked up to someone or took anything from anybody?
I guess it's just like interesting when how you developed your basketball. It sounds like you kind of develop yourself, but I sometimes find people like role model other people, and it can kind of speed up the process. Sometimes we develop ourselves, but my question was more to the basketball side there, when you develop your skills in that. But it sounds like you picked up those discipline habits from your family.
Yeah, I picked up the discipline habits, just the concept of just show up consistently. I started working at part-time jobs when I was 15 years of age.
Wow.
And that was just the work ethic. That's basically where I learned the work ethic. And at home, we had my sister and we had to wake up and do chores on the weekends, clean the kitchen and clean your bedroom, stuff like that. Just normal child disciplines that you get from your parents. And that stuff was all that I knew. So when I started playing basketball, I figured the only thing I did was what I already knew, which was just show up consistently and let's just do the work and let's see what happens. And I wasn't smart enough to understand how crazy of an idea that was. And that's a good thing. So that's how I was able to keep working and make it work out.
Awesome. Yeah, sorry, I had a slight freeze there, but I think we're all good now. Yeah, so could you tell us a little bit more about the importance of discipline? It sounds like it's something that is embedded in you. For someone who's perhaps not in the place where like they want to get to, whether it's in basketball, we're not necessarily talking about basketball here, or even sport for that matter, but a specific goal, they've got, but they find discipline to do like the things they need to do consistently really difficult. If you've got any sort of guidance for people in that situation, how they can start to develop more discipline in their life?
Absolutely. So one of the biggest challenge with discipline, Johnny, is that people are trying to make themselves be more disciplined. That's actually, it's when people start off that way, they usually end up failing. And that's it. That's the problem. And I'll tell you how we can fix it. So the thing about trying to make yourself be more disciplined is that you have to remember to do it. That's like someone saying, well, I hear from people every day. They say, well, Dre, I'm going to be more focused. I'm going to work harder. I'm going to get more motivated. I'm going to, listen to a confidence podcast and get myself activated every day, whatever I had to do to get myself ready. The thing is, a discipline challenge is not really a mindset challenge. What it actually is a structural challenge. And when you structure things the right way, you actually make the mindset piece easier. So, for example, let's say a person wanted to be more motivated or more focused or more disciplined, for example. One thing they can do is I can list off a bunch of things, bullet points here, but let's say one is All right, how much sleep are you getting the night before? All right, now if you're getting 5 hours of sleep every night, it's going to be hard to be as disciplined as someone who's getting 8 hours of sleep. Why? Because they have more willpower and more energy to stick to their disciplines. If you are trying to stay out of the pantry eating snacks and candy and ice cream, it's easier when you have more willpower because of what you ate the night before, or how much sleep did you get the day before, or how much exercise are you getting? How are you structuring your day? So a discipline challenge is actually a structural challenge. So if someone wants to be more disciplined, the first thing they need to do is look at the structure and the organization of their lives, or lack thereof, and let's get that in order. And when we get the structure in order and you start following the structure, the discipline becomes a byproduct of the right structure. So just like I told you, for example, I had my parents they kind of enforced discipline upon me with home stuff and going to school and respect for authority and things like that, not for playing sports. But when I went to play sports, it was the only thing that I knew because that's what I saw at home. So the structure was kind of already baked into me. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
it's putting the structure in place. So for example, you have this show. Like, how often do you record your episodes?
So yeah, it's a really good example. So like for me, I know at the weekend I'm going to pre-record 4 solo episodes and schedule a guest episode for that week.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the same time. I know I'm going to go through a process of writing the script and then I'm going to schedule them. So that's how I know how to do it rather than being like trying to blag it.
Exactly. So you have a structure for how you continually create content that keeps the material going on this show so that your audience, all they see is the end product. They just know what days episodes are going to come out. They know what they're going to get. They have a pretty good feel for your flow and your style. But it's the structure that you have put in place that allows the discipline to happen. It's not that you become disciplined, then you make a structure. No, you make the structure first, and the discipline is a byproduct of the structure. So this is the challenge that a lot of people have is they say, well, I'm just going to be more disciplined, be more disciplined, be more disciplined. That can work for a short period of time, but eventually you're not going to do it anymore. You put the structure in place. It's like someone being in the military. The structure of the military is so strong that you don't have a choice but to be disciplined because you have to follow the structure. Yeah. So that's what people need to do is figure out, how do I get the structure? And usually when you go and you get the right coach, you get into the right mastermind group, you get the right mentors around you, they will help you put the structure in place and the discipline will start to come out of you. So a lot of people think that their challenge is they're not disciplined, or I'm not a disciplined person. It's garbage. Everybody's disciplined when they had the right structure around. Put somebody in the military, we'll find out how disciplined you are really quick. All right, discipline comes out of anyone when they're in the right place. So people just have to set the environment up that makes it easy for them.
So funny you're talking about this. I mean, I'm part of 10X mentoring with Grant Cardone, and they're very heavy on their discipline. Like same day, same times you're going to wake up, calls. I know he's not for everyone, but like same time you're going to make your calls and same time you're going to put out your things. And we were talking about this yesterday. And also another book that comes to mind is Willpower Doesn't Work, that I read. And I remember implementing some of that by Benjamin Hardy. And that was about, you can't rely, there's only so much of this willpower and it's not going to last when you're just trying to do things like, I've got to do this, this, and this when I'm going to do it. It's like making those systems work for you. And yeah, what you're saying is having support groups around you, right? To help you with those systems.
Yeah, it can be in the form of a support group, and the support group can be one person, right? Somebody can hire you as a coach. And if you understand, let's say somebody wants to start a podcast, they don't know how, they think they're not disciplined, they can hire you as a coach and you can help them put a structure around their life so that they can sit down and record like they're supposed to. So it can be multiple people, it can be one person, it can be an idea they get from a course. It doesn't have to be a human, but they need the structure. And a lot of people fail at structure, especially entrepreneurs who can make their own schedules and do whatever they want. They usually end up blowing the time, right? Because they're not organized. So that organization is the key.
Yeah, totally. What kind of linking on from that is, and I'd love to get your view on this, is like, I'm a big fan of planning and having got a bit of a project management background and also a sort of a bit of more recent last year, a sales background and, being a coach as well in a couple of niches. Like I'm quite a big fan of planning, but, you hear this phrase sometimes, go with the flow. So for you, do you feel like there's room for a mix of a bit of flow and, space for what you want to do, or versus being fully structured, what you got to be doing every day of your week, every hour? what's your kind of view on that? Can there be a bit of flow? Does it need to be all planning? Yeah, just love to get your view on that.
Good question. And my answer is the flow happens within the confines of the discipline. It happens within the confines of the structure. So when you put the structure in place and people are following and you're following the structure consistently, first of all, you get into a flow by following the structure. So the flow comes from following the structure. You get into habit. Human beings are creatures of habit. We are wired for habits. We are wired to do things over and over and over again, the same things the same way every time. Habits take over. Basically, our unconscious thinking is about 85% of our thoughts. Only 15% of things that we consciously think about. 85% is stuff that we do unconsciously. So that's our wiring. So if someone wants to work within, you want to work within your natural state, what you need to do is put things in place that can become structured and habitual. The flow happens when you are doing the habits over and over again. And when then your instinct takes over, and then you will naturally, you can do great things, spontaneous things, let's say, within the flow of the structure that you have in place. So let me give you an example. I come from the sports world, right? So a lot of basketball players would often ask me, Dre, how can I do a dribbling move? Like, who's your favorite basketball player, John? Are you a basketball fan?
I'm not a massive follower, to be honest. I know the big names, obviously the Jordans. I've watched that, the LeBron,
Okay.
and
Jordan,
things like
that's
that.
fine.
Yeah.
All right, Jordan, LeBron, doesn't matter. It can be like LeBron James. Everybody knows who that is. All right.
Yeah.
So a player says, how can I do moves in the game like LeBron James? Because we know that LeBron doesn't get in the game and think about what to do. He just naturally does it, right? Michael Jordan, the same thing. How do they naturally do these amazing moves that become highlights and everybody's watching them 20 years later? It's because they practice so much and they're so prepared in the fundamentals that when they get into the game, their fundamentals are so sharp that they get into a state of flow. They don't have to consciously think about what to do. And the improvisation comes from the fact that we're in the state of flow. You can't improvise when you're thinking. All right, you don't improvise when you're overthinking, when you're self-conscious. You improvise when your conscious mind is completely shut off and you allow your instincts to take over. And that only happens when we're letting that 85% take over, the unconscious, the stuff that we don't have to think about. It's the same way that we get all our best ideas when we're just falling asleep or just waking up or we're in the shower or we're driving to work. Why? Because we're not consciously thinking. The conscious mind is slow compared to the unconscious mind. Instinct is much faster. So the flow that you're asking about, going with the flow, happens when you get into that 85% state, not when you are overthinking. And usually we have to think a lot consciously when we don't have habits because we have to figure out what to do every single moment. You want to get out of that. That's why the structure matters so much. And that's where the discipline comes from. And that's where the flow and the spontaneity comes from.
Yeah. Oh, I love that point. And just for the clarity of maybe one or two listening, you're not necessarily saying we need to have structured discipline for working like 24/7 hours a day, but having structure in our day so that actually maybe we structure in some time for dinner, time with family as well as doing our work. So days, basically the flow, but not guessing what you're doing through the day. That's right. What we're trying to get away from.
And you can have structure even structure for the times when you don't have structure. So for example, let's say you have an hour for dinner, if that's what it's going to be, or your day ends at this time of day. Is nothing else after this time, but you're going to bed at this time. So that space right there, do what you want to do. But there's still some organization and some structure in the spontaneity. Spontaneity fits within the organization because time is our most valuable resource. So I know some people may look at something like that and say, well, I don't want to be so militant as having my whole day kind of organized and laid out. Well, do you want your day to be unorganized and not laid out? Which way do you want it? I mean, it's going to be one way or another. So it's really just figuring out what are the most important things, making sure that they are structured into your day, into your schedule. And then if there's going to be some open time, have your open time, but make sure when it's time to get back on the clock, get back on the clock.
Yeah, totally. One other thing that kind of pops up for me on that, and I know I've been guilty of this in the past, and I know I have people I've worked with or even friends like comment saying, I structure it like this, but I just don't stick to it. Do you think, have you ever faced that where people perhaps aren't realistic with how they're structuring their day?
Absolutely. It's when one thing I tell people is stop making to-do lists and start using the calendar. Because the calendar is finite and it demands that you prioritize what you are actually going to do versus what you want to do. because you can't fit everything into 24 hours. But then what someone will do is they'll schedule a task from 9 to 10, 10 to 11, 11 to 12, 1 to 2, 12 to 1, 1 to 2, 2 to 3. And they don't even factor in, coming up for air, going to the bathroom, a cigarette break, whatever you do, lunch, a phone call, scrolling social media for 10 minutes. They don't factor any of that in. So you really have to, two things. Number one is you have to factor in your priorities. And the good thing about using the calendar is you really start prioritizing what matters versus what doesn't. And when things continually don't make it onto the calendar, maybe they're not that important and you should not even try to do them or delegate them to someone else. And number two is that when you are putting things into the calendar, it forces some urgency on you if you have the wherewithal to actually stick to what's on your calendar. And for that, you have to put things on there that actually matter enough to you for you to move yourself to action. What I call those are your discipline anchors. And the anchor is simply, what are the things that you care about enough that you are willing to endure some discipline in order to achieve them? And for a lot of people, Johnny, they simply don't know what that is. They don't have an answer to that question. They don't know what they want strongly enough that they're willing to kind of hold themselves accountable for making sure that those things get done. And this is where your associations come into play. This is where having the right coach or being in the right mastermind or being in the right program with other people who are going to kind of check you and hold you accountable when you're BSing. That's where that matters so much, because it's very easy for human beings to quit on themselves and not follow through on something you told yourself you would do because nobody knows about it. But if you're in a mastermind group and you get into a little pod of 5 people and now the other 4 are all showing up doing what they're supposed to do and you're not, you feel like a jerk, right?
Yeah.
To those other 4 people. It's much harder to not show up for other people than it is to not show up for ourselves. It shouldn't be like that. It should be the opposite, right? But this is just the way human nature is.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, can resonate with that. My mastermind group, it's all good. Like making sure you're reporting everything what you're doing. So
right.
that kind of like I was going to touch on. I was going to ask you about like mental toughness, because going through going through whether it's sport, whether it's outside of sport, there's going to be like naturally there's going to be some setbacks. And one of my favorite quotes from Tony Robbins is actually, our biggest problem is that we think we shouldn't have any. And, there's always going to be challenges that come up.
Right.
How, I mean, developing mental toughness, was the peer group one of the strongest ways you found to develop that? Or were there any other ways you found useful to develop like mental toughness?
The development of mental toughness for me really was kind of more of a solo endeavor. It was really just a lot of the stuff that just going through the setbacks as an athlete and just fighting to make it. I was the type of person who always, any situation I was in, I always wanted to fight back against the situation. I'm just wired as a competitor. That's just part of my wiring as a person. I've always been competitive. And anytime a situation didn't go the way that I wanted it to go, whether on the court or off the court, I always looked at it as, and I tell my audience this, that after a setback, you put a comma, not a period. And the simple concept is, if you put a comma in the middle of a sentence, that means you're not done, right? There's another thought to be added to it. But you put a period, that means the thought is over. So I always tell people is use commas, not periods, especially when you face a setback, which means there's more of this story to be told. And so has always been my mentality. And that was really just a lot of stuff that I just kind of had to run off my own energy, because when you're facing situations where things are not working and there's nothing in your reality that says you are going to be successful, most people, they decide to be quote unquote realistic. And in our society, when we hear the word realistic, what does it mean to us? It signals, take your ambitions from up here and bring them down here, right? That's usually what we mean when we say realistic, even though that's not what the word actually means, but that's usually how people use it. So for me, it was always fighting against that reality and deciding I'm going to shape and create my own reality. Whereas most people who faced a lot of the situations that all of us face, especially entrepreneurs and people who build their own things and do their own things and turn them into successes, we face situations all the time where it looks like we should quit. We shouldn't even be doing this. Why don't just pack it up and go home? And that's what most people do. And I never want to be like most people. And as Earl Nightingale said in The Stranger's Secret, or I think he said it in Leading the Field, you look around and you see a bunch of people doing stuff and you want to get ahead of them, just do the opposite of the most people, do the opposite of the crowd, right? So that has always been my mentality.
Yeah, do the opposite. It's like, I always like to look at it. I don't know about you. And people are very quick to give you what they term advice, whether it's advice or not. It might be an opinion. But like, I always think of it from a place of, have they got the result I want? So that's personally how I see it. It's not like you're never, disrespectful or anything, but you can choose what you. I always feel like I want to emphasize to the listener, you can choose who you listen to. And I think that's really important, having that good peer group around, like you were touching on earlier as well.
Absolutely. Having the right people around is a big thing. And that law of association, you become the average of the people that you're spending the most time around. And the good thing about the world that we live in today, Johnny, is that you can associate with somebody without ever actually knowing them, right?
Yeah.
You can just listen to their podcasts or read their books or follow them on social. They can be part of your circle if you are consuming more of their stuff than you are of somebody else's. So this is a choice, and anyone you can put anybody in your circle these days, because people who are successful usually like to talk about themselves, right? They like to tell how they became successful. So their material's out there and available for you.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's like, there's a concept of that in Think and Grow Rich as well. It's like the mental boardroom, or a kind of thing of that. And
I remember that.
I could be having a conversation with like Master Yoda, or even the late Bob Proctor, who study the works of it. Those kind of people, and right. The Tony Robbinses of the world and people like that. So yeah, I love that point about actually you can touch base with like people you don't even know. So yeah, Dre, just like a couple more questions really to round off the value you've really given us today. If someone's really going through a tough spell, for example, and they're just not getting results, and their confidence is really knocked down, and kind of they're losing that trust within themselves. I know for you're always bouncing back, but then their self-talk gets on top of them. Is there any kind of like small steps you would see useful for them to do?
Absolutely. So the first thing when somebody is being challenged with your confidence is the first thing you got to do is shut off the outside noise, whatever outside noise you're hearing. And how I explain it is you got to start listening through the bones instead of through the air. So the way this concept works is that all of us, when we hear our own voices, like I can hear my own voice as I'm speaking right now. It sounds different to me than it will sound when this episode comes out and I listen to it on the podcast app.
Yeah.
Because when I listen to the episode, when it gets published, the sound is going to be traveling through airwaves from the device into my ear. Even if it's in an AirPod, it's still traveling through air to get to my ear canal. But when I speak and I hear my own voice, that sound is that's traveling through the bones on the inside of my body up straight into my brain. It doesn't go through my ears. So all of us, the sound that we hear through our bones is our own voice talking to ourselves, whereas every other voice in the world is a sound traveling through air. So when you are challenged with your confidence, the first thing you have to do is turn off all the sound coming through the air and get back in touch with the sound coming through the bones, what most people call their instinct or their inner voice. Thing about instinct and inner voice, it's connected to the subconscious. The subconscious mind speaks in whispers, whereas the conscious mind speaks in a loud conversational tone. So if they're both speaking at the same time, you won't hear your instinct, because it never speaks above a whisper. So you have to shut off the conscious in order to hear the unconscious. And that's why, again, we get our best ideas and insights when we're in the shower or driving to work, or you just finished a long workout, or you just woke up. Why? Because the conscious mind is not talking. It's quiet at those times because it doesn't have anything to do. It's been sleeping, or you're doing some mindless task that you don't need to constantly think about. That's where our best insights and ideas come from. This is why people take time every day to do yoga or meditation, or I guess now they call it mindfulness exercises. Why? Because it's a practice for shutting up the mind. And we need this time to shut our minds up. The challenge these days, Johnny, is that these devices right here have us consciously wired and plugged into something. And usually what we're taking in these devices is what somebody else has to say, like what somebody else's text message or email or what they posted on Facebook. All of that has a conscious mind consciously talking. and you could never hear what's going on in the subconscious. So the number one thing is you got to get back in touch with your instinct. The number two thing is everybody should have they should have it written down, a list of goals of who you want to be as a person, what you are going to do as that person, and the results that person is going to produce. And that's something that you should be reading out loud to yourself every single day. Every single day. You should be reading out loud to yourself the goals that you want to achieve. Most people understand that concept. What actions will have to be taken in order to achieve those goals? Most people get that. And then the question most people never ask is, what type of person do I need to become in order to do this stuff? Because if you were already that person, you would already have the outcomes, right? So there's something about you as a person that needs to change. So what type of person do you need to be? You have that written down. Every day you should be telling yourself what type of person you need to be. And then you have to carry yourself as that type of individual, even when the results of that individual do not exist. So it's kind of like you're kind of playing a trick on yourself, but you're not really. This is not fake it till you make it. This is becoming it. Because when you carry yourself as a certain type of individual, people will treat you as that person as long as you can, maintain it. There's no reason why they won't, because most human beings, we judge people on the surface. We don't do a deep dive. You don't meet somebody and go do a deep dive on who they really are. You judge them based on how they show up, right? So if someone shows up a certain way, you treat them like that until they give you a reason not to. So that's how you have to kind of condition yourself to carry yourself as a type of individual you see yourself being in the future. And then you have become that person right there in the moment. It's only a matter of time before who you're being and the results meet like a magnet.
Awesome. I love that. Yeah, writing down your goals, but not just writing them down, saying them out loud, because you're telling your subconscious mind that, right? And you try to get that, connect with that subconscious rather than the conscious that's brainwashing you through the devices and going, you want this, 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 and this. Like, I like that exercise.
Right. And the more often you tell yourself something, it's only a matter of time before you accept it and believe it, no matter what it is, even if it's a lie.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we tell ourselves bad lies. Why not give it a good lie?
Exactly.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Dre, it's been amazing having you on. Thank you so much for everything you've shared today. And just before we sort of like wrap up today, is there like a final point or maybe a couple of points you'd like to share? And also, where can people find you?
Sure. The number one point that I would give to everyone in this audience is just keeping in mind that my whole brand is called Work on Your Game for a reason, that everybody has a game, no matter what your game is, whether you are an entrepreneur, whether you're looking for a job right now, trying to figure it out, you're in school, trying to get good grades, you're an athlete trying to play a sport and get to the pro level. Everybody has a game. And if you want your game to produce results, then you have to improve your game. You got to continually work on your game. And even once your game is producing results, you can't just kick back and say, okay, I'm good. I reached the pinnacle. You have to keep working on your game so it can continue to produce results. So work on your game that's a concept that applies to everyone, everywhere, no matter what it is that you're doing. We all have a game. You have to continually put time and effort into your game, and don't look at it as a bad thing that you're going to be continually working on your game. The human animal was made to work. You find a person who's not working anymore, they're miserable, and they usually end up dying because they don't have anything to do. We are made to work. That's what we're supposed to do. A dog is supposed to walk. A bird is supposed to fly. A fish is supposed to swim. A man is supposed to work. That's what we are made to do. When people retire and stop working, they pretty much die. So working on your game is a good thing. You should look forward to it. Just pick a game that you are excited about. And to answer your second question, where would I send people? You can get more information about me and get access to my courses and things that I do over at workonyourgameuniversity.com. That's workonyourgameuniversity.com.
Awesome. Well, we'll be sure to link that up in the show notes below as well, so people can find out more about your hugely valuable work. So once again, a big thank you for coming on the show today, Dre. It was a great conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity.
Awesome. So that concludes our episode for today. And remember, you are in control of your own self-esteem and confidence.